Welcome, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Seafood Matter podcast. I'm sitting with Hans' uncle, Fisherman in the Clyde. Hi, Hans.
Hello, Jim. How are you getting on?
Really good, thanks. Great to have you on the show.
It's great to be on the show. That's something I listen to a lot, and I'm really chuffed to be part of this.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to hear and good feedback. Tell me about your life, where it started, Hans.
So in your previous podcast, I've listened to that question, where did it all begin? And I'm trying to think. I mean, you sort of go right back to school days, I think, when I had an interest in boats and fishing. It was part of the family, really. It was all part of it. But school, I suppose, I didn't fit at school. School didn't really work for me. I don't know if it worked for you, but I didn't get out of school what I thought I should. I couldn't work out how to learn. I didn't do well with exams. In fact, I think probably all began with me getting called up to the rector's office, the headmaster's office, and getting put over a chair and given four of the best for being what he classed me as was a general nuisance.
Yeah. Not a pupil.
That was my school description: general nuisance. I found a school report that actually said, and I think what it would be first year, second year, what do you want to do? And it was to be a fisherman. What do you want to do? I want to be a fisherman. Uh-huh. So then you get into your teenage years and you're a bit of a kind of lost soul, and you don't really know where your life's going. I ended up leaving school. I had first opportunity I could, left school with bare minimum of qualifications, but I got a boat building apprenticeship in Glasgow. This was in Glasgow, where I went to started training to be a boat builder. Mm-hmm. And it was 4 guys out of McGrewer's boatyard that had left McGrewer's when it shut down. They went and started up their own business, and I sort of got brought in as a boy with them. But that actually, I learned a fair bit with that, really. That sort of started my whole interest in boat building, really. I learned quite a lot with them. We went to various different jobs, planking. I've still never built a whole boat myself yet. I've refitted plenty, but I've never actually built from scratch. We went out to different areas to work in different boats, and that was all quite good learning. Fiberglass work mostly.
Was this in the Clyde still?
That was in the Clyde, aye.
Mm-hmm.
Aye. Well, it was Paisley. It was an inland. It was a kind of inland boatyard, but we did. It was mostly fiberglass work. We ended up doing a lot of sort of wood stuff as well, replanking and moulds and stuff. But then 2 years in, the firm folded, went bankrupt, and I was left with not really knowing what to do. So moved with family in Islay. In the fish business. Sans Unkles, who has got a reputation that precedes him, really. A well-known fish buyer back in the day. So I went and worked with them for a bit, and then I got an apprenticeship doing a joiner, but I didn't take to living in Islay. So that's when I moved to Tayvallich. And in Tayvallich, my grandparents' house was there. I ended up staying in that and moving on to fishing. First job fishing when I was probably about 19. The first boat I had, I started doing diving back in the day when you could dive for scallops. Just go out, buy a boat and off you go. And we did that for a wee spell, and that was probably one of the best jobs I've had, scallop diving. Then I started working with one of the big prawn boats, Chris Brown, Venture West, one of those boats, and that just got me a wee bit learning about creel fishing. So I was toying between the two. I was doing diving, which is, like I said, that's probably the dive for scallops is one of the best forms of fishing. I just love it. You're actually stalking where they live. You can find, and you're seeing firsthand just the scallops on the seabed, so you're sort of picking away at what, the best of them, and you're finding small areas of ground that are can be loaded with scallops. Mm-hmm. That's
that must be a great buzz when you're diving and come across a real big
they're side by side, but the challenge with scallop diving is actually being able to see them. They're that well camouflaged in the seabed that you can't see from different angles. You'll be looking, and you might not have that clear a visibility. You might be able to see 10 feet, 15 feet in front of you, and you're looking and you don't see any scallops, and then you look the other way and you look back and there's one just where you'd been looking, so you go over to that, and when you get to it there's maybe 5 beside it that you haven't seen.
Would that be if they move that you see it, or just
I don't
from
think
a
they
different
move
angle?
I don't think they move so much. They're sitting in the seabed with a layer of sand or grit on top of them, and they look established. So I mean, they must move to a certain extent because they sort of you get them in different places, so they must move. But it's not like a mass migration. I think they flutter around in ones and twos.
Funny, and you say that now. It's an observation I had once, and you maybe say that makes sense. I had the restaurant in Scrabster, Captain's Galley, for a number of 20 years. I was getting scallops from divers in Orkney, and then I got scallops from divers in Loch Erebor, and I could very clearly see the difference in the shell, and I was fascinated.
I could probably. I mean, I think a lot of the boys that work in the dredgers will do that as well. They'll be able to, if you show them a scallop within their remit, within their knowledge, within their area of knowledge, they'll be able to tell you where it came from.
Wow.
I think with not 100% accuracy, but I could certainly cast an opinion on that wouldn't be far off right. Which is there's different thickness of the shell, the colour of the shell, the shape, the scoop in the bottom of it. They've all got different characteristics in different areas, and different growth on the shell as well.
The thing that fascinated me most about that was when you look as far as the globe is concerned, there's very little distance between Orkney and Loch Erebor.
Aye.
I
But it's different waters, different feeding, I suppose. It's different currents, and also the surrounding ground, the nature of the seabed that they're on. Mud through to sand. You even get scallops sitting in bare rock in places. And that'll have a rock or a stony, gravelly based scallop will have a much cleaner shell than a muddy based one. And then you'll have different worms and barnacles growing about them as well. But it's definitely the shape of them that's.
When you have the worms and barnacles and that, is that telling you an age?
I don't even actually, because there's a whole. Not a misunderstanding, but I don't know how good the science is in the age of these things. The rings are supposed to, they claim the rings would show their age, but that's really just growing spurts. So if you had a growing spurt, you could have 2 different growing spurts a year, 3. I mean, I think a scallop's probably a decent. I think 5 years would be a good age for a scallop.
Fascinating. If I could take you back a wee bit, one of the things that fascinated me when you were saying about where you started and coming from.
The general nuisance.
No.
I can still do that.
He is associated Unkles with Ailey.
Aye.
In my head, it was Unkles of Glasgow.
Yeah, Glasgow Fish Market. That was but that's gone back a generation again. I think we're still talking about the same guy, Sands, who we're talking about, but Sands' father and my grandfather were closely connected in Glasgow, and Robbie Unkles. There was a third brother that set up different fish businesses in Glasgow, and they very much were a driving force for most of the fish market, the fish wholesale in Glasgow would have been that, and quite a reputation. And then Sands Junior, young Sands we call him, he's probably he's in his 80s now. He set up. And he'd be the more familiar to the people, to the listeners that are aware of him, he'd be the more familiar man. He had big investment in the herring industry. He had that going really, really well. Big export. He got an award, the Queen's Award for Industry for export. And then the inshore ban for herring came in, and that was the end of that business. It folded them.
Okay. Where did the inshore ban? I mean, I can remember when the North Sea had a herring ban.
When was it?
Yeah, when did that?
I'd be guessing at that. It would have to be the 70s, I would think. I would think that would have to be in the 70s. And he'll remember, he'll be fully aware, because it was,
yeah.
he went down quite dramatically with that one.
Yeah. So what kept going then? Was it your boat building or your fishing?
So it kind of jumped between the two. So when I started diving, I got my own boat, the first boat I had. I named it the Shyle of Pight, SHYLEPIGHT, Shyle of Pight. And that
there's a story behind
there's a wee mix up in that. That was, and then my father was furious with me, absolutely furious with me for calling the boat like that. He says a girl should be called a nice girl's name, it should have a bonny name to a boat. So the next boat that came along was called the Girl Donald. But that was that was mostly sort of diving and fishing with a few creels for lobsters and stuff. So I did that. But each boat, when I was first starting out, you just sort of made do with the boat you had. But then really wanted to start improving the boats. You're seeing that you could fish better if your boat was knackier or better set up. You could definitely fish better with it. It was more comfortable, especially if you're staying away at all. So gradually, I started doing up each boat as it came, got a better and better refit, and then that kind of developed into. I then got if you go back a wee bit from where I am, I got in tow with my neighbour Dougie Churnside, and we sort of started working as a partnership, the pair of us together, and that meant that we could sort of focus our time. But there was two of us driven to make the fishing thing work, which is always a good thing. Yeah.
Am I detecting out of that where the D8 was born?
D&H Boats?
Yeah.
Aye. D&H Boats was Dougie and Hans Boats. So
okay.
Aye.
Yeah.
That was, we ran that business for a long time. So then we worked really, really well together with some really good times, affluent times as well. We fished well. And the boat building side of things was sort of kicking in. So each boat we sort of got it, did it up, fished it for a couple of years or so, sold it on, made a bit of money on it, bought the next bigger size boat up, and sort of built up. So over the years we actually developed we upgraded the boats to quite a high standard. And I think probably the peak of it was in the turn of the 2000s. We had a Gemini catamaran. Then it cost $250,000 to make it back then, which was a lot of money to throw into it. But we were both motivated and driven to have a really well functioning fishing boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that fiberglass?
Fiberglass, yeah. 10 metre boat, not particularly big, but a beamy, solid working platform, and that really got us into. We had that in a really nicely organised working system we had. Whereas it was a partnership we were working. There was the two of us. Though we worked well together as a business, with both of us working together in the boat, we both had a alpha male like working methods. So we decided that the best thing to do was to split the working time between us. So he would take the boat for a month, for 4 weeks, and then I would take it for 4 weeks, and we had crew that could keep the boat going. So when you were doing your 4 weeks on, you worked the boat flat out. You didn't miss a day if you could help it, and then you would immediately tag it over to the other guy, to the other guy, and he would do the same. So that kept the boat working hard, and then we were also getting 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off ourselves, which is that's a good way of working.
That's quite fascinating. That
we also, the whole beauty of that was that we'd got that to a stage where we worked the boat for the winter months. The best of the fishing was through the winter months, from November through till March, April. So we would work the boat for the 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off for that period, and then we would tie it up for the summer and take maybe 4 or 5 months off, which was that's a really good working pattern to have got yourself into, where you're doing 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, and then you get 3 months off in the summer. Mm-hmm. And then through that period as well, in the time off, we'd do a bit of diving.
What came into my mind when you were describing the 10 metres, beamy, you haven't actually built a boat from scratch yourself yet, but always amused me slightly when regulations would change. It was invariably limited by size, so you would get maybe 10 metres boats, over 10s couldn't fish some sort of method, over 15s couldn't, so you were restricted to size. So with the result, you would get a massive beamy big boat.
They call it, a rule beater. I think rule beater's the word you're looking for, isn't it? And they're not uncommon. You see, how many boats have you seen that are snub-nosed? They've had the front of them cut off to fit under a regulation. And it's actually it's almost a safety hazard. Well, it is a safety hazard because you're adapting the boat to suit the rule rather than to suit its own.
That's a good point.
Its own
so
seakeeping qualities.
Yeah,
and that's really is a problem. But then I understand there has to be rules and regulations through the whole industry, but I don't think blanket rules are the way forward. It's individual. Each boat should be worked out in its own merit. A 10 metre was the size that kept us. It was more licensing than regulation. If you went over 10 metres, your licence changed. And under 10 metre licence, it was a much easier licence to use. You could jump species and you could fish without any restrictions. We actually went on. The sort of big change was for me to build up the kind of empire of boats, though it's not an empire. Empire's too big a word. But my lifetime with the big change.
It's your empire.
My personal empire.
That's good enough. That's good enough for me.
It's not. So the big change was when we started fishing for creel caught prawns, and they were all tubed, stored in the boxes and kept live and exported. And when we started doing that, we're sort of maybe not the first in with it, but we were in the early days of that. And you helped develop keeping the stuff live and keeping it good. So we worked at keeping tanks in the boat, and
that became massive in the West Coast.
Yeah, it's been it's the industry of the West Coast, but it's now actually it's now killing itself. That's just for all the talk of creel fishing being sustainable is probably the most damaging form of fishery that there is at the moment. I think it's so heavily overfished with creels.
Is that right?
Absolutely convinced that needs to be stopped really, really quickly, because the amount of creels in the water is absolutely out of control.
I know I'll be speaking to some bigger boats, and maybe when they're at sea and all of a sudden I'll get a volley of swears and I'll say, oh, what's wrong? There's creels here.
There isn't anywhere, there's nowhere that you can put a prawn creel in the whole west coast of Scotland. There isn't one.
There isn't
one. If anywhere that can take creels has got them. It's really. It's been completely unregulated. It's not, because in theory they're absolutely right. Creel fishing should be a really sustainable, non-destructive form of fishing. The theory of that is absolutely right, and it is. But the reality is we've been left to our own devices. There's no regulation, so there's creels absolutely everywhere. When I started creel fishing, there was, between Oban and Kintyre, there was three big players. There was three big name boats. John McFarlane, Brian Cockle, Chris Brown were the three big name boats in that area. They each had 1,000 creels apiece, whereas nowadays every 1,500 creels, 3,000 creels per boat is not unheard of. And the problem is you're catching less. Definitely the catches have gone down without a doubt. So you're catching less, so the remedy for that is to put more creels out.
Hans, one of the things that always comes to my mind when a conversation comes round to amount of creels, I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but I go back to my father's days when they would be part of the year sea netting and part of the year at creels, lobsters mainly, at crab. They made a good living. There was 5 of a crew on the boat, and they had 100 creels.
Aye. Well, that shows you the different, the difference in the stocks.
Yeah.
It absolutely clearly shows you. You can't say it's not diminishing. It's definitely a diminishing product or the fish, a diminishing fishery that needs to be nipped immediately. And because again, there's how do you go about that? What's the how do you actually police that or manage it? And there's not, everyone's got opinions, but because there's no, the fishing, particularly the under 10 metre static, mobile static gear fishery has been unregulated for they've been allowed to run their own course, and that is going to change. That's we can't be expected to carry on unregulated. That's, we've got to accept that there's going to be control. So, but how do you control it? I think, it's obviously, well, all forms of fishery, the best way of controlling all forms of fishery is controlling the effort. The creel fishing, you divide that down to number of creels per boat, and you probably do that by the number of people that work in the boat.
Yeah, creels per man.
Yeah, creels per man.
Yeah.
If you've got 300 creels per man, say.
Yeah.
3-man boat, 900 creels, you should be able to make a living with 900 creels. If you get a 2-man boat, 600 creel, 1-man boat, so that seems to me quite simple and straightforward. Enforcement is another problem. How do you enforce it? But for me, again, that should be by the penalty. If the penalty should be worked on the same basis, and this probably applies to all forms of fisheries. If you're breaking the rules, then it's not a fine, it's points in your licence. You've got a licence for fishing. If you can have your licence taken off you, that's a real and genuine threat. Whereas a fine to some people isn't so much of a threat. Whereas if you've got the threat of losing your licence, you're definitely going to pay attention to that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're totally. Would there not be a way that they could maybe have electronic tags on the strings? Or
they do that in other countries. I think that's got to be the way. I think you get a wee barcode reader like you get for your dog. It's got a chip in it, isn't it? Yeah. So you get a wee barcode reader that could sit next to the hauler and read the creels coming over.
Uh-huh.
So there is ways of doing it. I don't really want to get too involved in designing that, but there is ways to do that.
You'll not have any fisherman friends left. But that's really interesting. But
the same all forms of fishing, it's control effort. Your scallop dredging, which gets the big bad name. That's environmentalists leap onto scallop dredging as the more destructive form of fishing, and it is destructive. There's no denying that the towing big metal rakes along the seabed is damaging, but it's the amount of effort that's put into that. If back in the day, the 80s, 90s, there was a huge scalloping fleet that worked, and the damage that they were continually working the same grounds, and it's now recovered. There's now, I can hand in heart take you to places that have been dredged within the last few years, and you would never know there'd been a dredger there.
Yeah.
So
Ian Fletcher says that on a recent podcast where it seabed repair.
Yeah, but but then you've also got to accept that there's certain areas that won't repair. You could, especially there's the northern sea fans and stuff that are really long living sea creatures. If you damage them, they've gone for a long time. So that you've got
a balance.
There's a balance, but it's down to effort. I mean, I think there's only 3 scallop dredgers that I can think of in the whole of the Kintyre area. This area that I'd be familiar with. There's only three dredgers. If you gave 3 guys or 3 farmers a tractor and a plough and told them to plough the whole of Kintyre, where would they get to with that? You couldn't do it. You physically couldn't do it. So it's intensity and effort. If there's only a few people doing it, and that's why Ian Fletcher's probably so successful and so can keep his method going, because he travels around the whole country. He gets to move.
That's right.
And that's the whole downside of the...
And going back to the effort as well, going back to the situation I was explaining about my father, their boat, 100 creels. Now, do you feel there's something that with a boat, many a boat now would have 3,000 creels, maybe 2,000, smaller ones that have 1,000. If they all reduced that, not only to help, would it help the fishing and the catch rate, but the market would be
I see it as
less supply, and the price would go up.
Yeah, so I see it as an absolute all-round win situation. It might certainly take 1 year before you notice anything. The following year, and 2-3 years, you're going to be definitely seeing bigger returns. You're definitely going to be seeing more, catching more stuff with your less pots. Yeah. So you're doing less work. You're catching the same. expenses, your layout's less, the market's stronger.
Taking it a stage on my father's, not about me and my father, but it's just taking my mind back to it. Now that would have been the 50s and the 60s when they were fishing. I can remember when I was in the industry, going back, I built a factory in Wick in the mid to late 70s. We just opened it before 1980. So you get into the 80s and 90s, and as part of it, I was buying lobsters. It was closed. I came out of it in 92. Now, so you're talking maybe 15, maybe not quite 20 years previous to when my father was fishing. And the price I was paying for lobster was the same as my father was getting in the 60s.
Aye.
So,
I think it's green crabs. Green crabs are completely inflation proof. They've never changed in price the whole time I've been fishing. Okay. But yeah, so that's another element to what I'm trying to do now is creating markets. Everything I'm catching, I'm trying to sell locally. I fish with a very small number of pots, and I really target selling the stuff. And
how many pots do you?
65.
You see,
65 pots,
and you can make a living.
And I'm not. So the stage of my life I'm at, I'm on a wind down. I'm not pushing. If I wanted to work harder, I could. But at 65 pots, I think this summer, my average grossing has been just under £400 a day. So it's not. There's boats that'll sort of dismiss that as being an irrelevant amount of money, but given that I've got virtually no expenses.
Well, that's what it all kicked. It's as the old saying, it's the bottom line that counts.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you all looked after our expenses.
Yeah, people, they want to be. It's wanting to be the big shot with the biggest catches. It's a good feeling. We've all been there. We all want to do it. You want to have that reputation as being the big boat. There's a draw to that, but it's just exactly what you're saying. To me, the big boat is the one that has the most bottom line for the least work.
It's not necessarily the biggest boat with the biggest engine and the biggest nets. He's not necessarily going to be the one that make the crew make the most money
with. Yeah, and that's But then it's the other thing is focusing on money. I've always focused on the love of the job. The money's a bonus. You get a proper buzz out of fishing well, and it's a different thing to top grossing, and they're two sort of really different entities. The money and the joy, the pleasure of the job.
What you're saying there is reminding me of another conversation I had. As I said to you, I built a fish factory, and I was just obviously struggling to get it open and going and making it work, and I was putting a lot of work into it, and I was freezing some fish, selling fresh to the
Were you in your own gym?
Yeah. It was the main cities of the UK and a little bit abroad eventually. Now, a friend of mine who was processing in Aberdeen, who was a big help to me, I says, Billy, if you don't mind, I'll explain what I'm doing, and you can tell me if I'm doing it wrong. Right. So I'm buying the fish, and I'm filleting it and putting it into single ounce grades, and where we're selling it, what we're buying it for, what we're selling it for. I went through the whole thing with him. He says, Jim, he asked me for advice. I says, yeah.
You're not going to want to hear it.
You're going to get, it's my advice you're going to get. He says, stand back, you're doing nothing wrong. I think it's clever the way obviously you put a lot of work into it. I can detect that in what you say. And a real important thing that I take my hat off to you for is you obviously at some stage in your career you've thought it's not all about fishing harder.
It's about fishing not less,
but it's keeping the expenses down, and not. Because if you fish harder, you're just taking more out of yourself, as well as maybe not putting more in the bank.
There's much more to life than just fishing.
Yeah.
So how
did you handle that?
Oh, because I'm lazy. I don't think I want to. Not lazy. Lazy. I want to find the best way. For me, the best way of earning a living that I could find out of any career that I could choose from is fishing, because you can pick and choose when you work. If you're running your own boat, you can pretty much decide when you're going out and when you're working. You can choose to work hard, extra hard, earn well, and you can choose to wind back, and that creates a life balance I've thrived on.
Would you not say, when you say there, the life balance, but the bigger the boat, the bigger the expenses? Yeah. Well, you don't have that. You haven't the comfort or luxury of that decision. You got to keep going.
Yeah, aye, but then I mean, we always tried to work at keeping the running costs of the boat, not going too extravagant with them. I don't think we were being tight, because if the boat needed something, the boat gets it. That's the bottom line. I think if you had any cut, it was to what you took yourself. So the boat always got what it needed, and then if you've got a healthy, strong, capable working boat, then it's easy to make a living with that.
Obviously, my life is in fishing as well. What you're saying there, it reminded me, very often I've been in conversations and there would be a comment from a fisherman's wife saying, "Oh, if the boat needed it, we'd get it." Not the case with the house.
Not good, aye. But aye, I'm kind of, yeah. But then I've got other interests as well, because of the whole building side of things. I would factor the time that I wasn't fishing into doing, building stuff. Built extensions in the house as well. Built the whole workshop that we've done all the boats in. But that was very much when I was working with Dougie. We were a very strong partnership that worked well together. So we could. Yeah, two of you working together is a big help, because you've got a backup team. If you're having a bad day, they can cover. You're getting covered, and sometimes you wouldn't have the drive, or you'd run out of oomph, and he could take over and then work both ways. So that was a critical part of me building to where I've got just now, is working with Dougie. And we actually ran a partnership for probably 25 years together, a business partnership for 25 years, and we managed to close it down and still be the best of friends, which is unusual. That's unusual for a business partnership to run its course and finish amicably. So really pleased with that.
The thing that I can't help thinking, Hans, you're out there fishing. The knowledge and experience you've had in boat building, that must come to you and be an asset.
I think you don't know what you know. It's especially as you start getting a few years behind you. You've got a knowledge base that seems obvious and natural to you. And I'm not alone with this. This applies to most people. You've accumulated a knowledge, and it doesn't seem like it's just a second nature to you how to go about things, how to do things. And I make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes, and I'm still learning from the mistakes. But that's, I think, what you get better at as you get older is covering up your mistakes.
Well, I have a rule of thumb throughout my career: the guy that doesn't make a mistake, I don't want to know him.
Yeah,
because it's only in his head.
But it's exactly. But then the other thing, do you not think that the knowledge base that you've got in your, you'll have it as well, I've got it in my head, as far as dealing with the science side of the fishing industry, or the environmentalist side as well. I mean, that's a whole other sort of subject. But the scientist side, they've got data and they've got studies and they do papers and research. But the knowledge that I hold in my head is undatifiable. You can't turn what I've got in my head into data, but it's so relevant to the fishing industry, it's so relevant to the job that we're all doing. We all carry that knowledge, but you can't turn it into usable data. But it's the data that the scientists are producing that is making a lot of the regulations and decisions.
But the problem on that, on many an occasion, the scientists are going by what they've read and learned. they've not got the work.
It's not hard ground experience. There's some. I mean, because I think the science side of things.
It's needed.
Should be our friends. We should be merging as much as we can with the scientists, because they've got know-how that we don't. You know, they've definitely got understanding and knowledge of more detailed stuff than we could ever have. So we do need to communicate better with the science side of the industry.
Hans, what you're saying there, even in Iceland, now in our recent podcast with Jon Christensen and Ian Harkis, Jon Christensen reckoned that biggest setback for Iceland was when the scientists would go out, they would do all their work on trawlers out at sea with fishermen, and then they started getting their own ships and doing that themselves. What that did, okay, it was lovely modern boats with great facilities, but he says it took scientists and the fishermen apart. Because that's what it created, the monster it created. So it's very much what you're saying.
Trying to put across. I mean, because I know that I disrespect a lot of scientific decisions, because you don't not so much trust that it's too. Why do you disrespect them? They're too boffin related. Is that the right word? It's non-practical experience, I think, and again that applies to the MCA. It's non-practical experience, and if the surveyors had to work in a fishing boat as part of their job to get their qualification to be a fishing boat surveyor, if they had to work in a fishing boat for a 6-month period, that's the guy you would want to come and survey your boat. You know, so the same applies to the science side of things. If you've got scientists fully integrated and involved for a period of time, not a day or two here and there, for a period of time, they're going to be much better informed, and you're going to be informed from them as well, because there's some pretty interesting stuff. The staff now, Sam's, you know, the marine laboratory, Sam's fascinating what they're up to. Water temperatures, water salinity levels, and you know, changing waters and all that. For my job, that's relevant information that if that gets explained to me clearly, I can, you know, I've got an input to that information.
Okay. So, where did the career go from what you were building, and then you went fishing?
Yeah.
And to where you are now?
So latterly, we'd got to the peak of where we were going with the Gemini catamaran. That was a properly good prawn creel fishing machine. It was, you know, we'd really sort of refined it into being quite a good piece of kit. And then I'm finding that you can't really. And that's another problem with creel fishing, is you can't move your ground so easily. You know, the mobile, well, it's in the clues in the definition of the sector, isn't it? The mobile sector and the static gear sector. So the static gear guys, the gear stays in the same place. You lift it, and it's difficult to move big areas to change ground. So we were fishing the same general area for a period of time, and that wasn't resting easy with either Doug and myself. We'd kind of done that, and then the next stage was to get an even bigger boat and then do travel, you know, like the super crabbers that you could load with creels, and you could really travel around the country. But we both thought, we've both had enough of this. You know, prawn fishing with creels is like a factory job. Lift your pots, you know, it's really repetitive. So we then decided it was time to close the partnership down.
You would still get a buzz if you were in a good fishing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we got real, because the other thing again was we fished with a lot less creels than our other boats, so we could move our ground, we could choose our grounds, and we chose to fish down towards the North Channel between Mull of Kintyre and Rathlin. It was quite open, exposed ground, so we weren't getting other boats around, so if we could work alongside the mobile guys that were towing for prawns, then we could move around and actually fish quite successfully. But we'd taken that to the peak of where it was going. With, you know, the next stage was a bigger boat, and neither of us really wanted to do that. I still wanted to carry on fishing. Dougie wanted out, so we sold the catamaran. I bought another boat, and I did that up, and it was more geared towards diving for scallops and doing prawns. And I probably had about another 5 years of fishing with that. But in the meantime, I'd been doing a lot of repairs for other people, and patchwork, you know, replacing bits of gunnel and redecking boats and stuff like that in between times. So I then that sort of gradually took over. And when I sold the Fruchgal, which was the last prawn boat I had, when I sold that, but just the work kept coming in for doing repairs and refits. 35-foot yacht, complete refit in that. 27-foot yacht, offshore 32s. You know, I've gutted completely down the deck and rebuilt quite a few boats. So I just rebuilt a couple of yachts. I'd bought a Cygnus 21 as my wind down retirement boat, and I fished that for sort of one winter really. But I kept getting too much work coming in for repairs to other people's boats. So that's kind of what I ended up doing for probably about 5 years. But in that process of working for other people, I was watching Dougie had a small 16-foot open boat that had a couple of Torpedo batteries in it and a small electric outboard, and he was using that for plootering about in, and it had a wee solar panel on it, and I was kind of watching that, and I was out in it a few times with him, and I was going, this has got the potential to work on a bigger boat. And I'm thinking that this is actually it's possible, because you could go out you could do the best part of a day with just a couple of batteries that you carried on, you know, you lifted on at night and charged the boat. You're going at a much slower pace, but it definitely caught my attention. I'm watching it, and there's this wee seed unbeknownst to me at the back of my head growing. The seed's cracked open and it's growing, and it's starting to germinate, and at the back of my head is sprouting, but I still hadn't really made the connection to doing it to Lorna Jane. But also in my general life, I've got a whole, not an obsession, but I've always found renewable, or they call it renewable energies, I don't like that term, just like I had 25, 26, 27 years ago, my house was completely powered, my house was powered by a wind turbine. I put a windmill up because I just love the concept of where we live's really windy, and you've got that spinning away and it's powering your house when you're not doing anything. You know, that concept, I can't get over that. Everyone doesn't want to do that. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to do that. But so I had the wind turbine up. I drove my wife mad, absolutely mad. But at one point we had a hot water cylinder in the back of our car, right, that I'd cut the radiator hose in the car and joined it into the hot water tank. And that made, on a trip, a 10-mile trip, that would heat the whole water cylinder hot. You'd have a whole tank of hot water. And then had a wee 12-volt pump that was connected to the battery that you could switch it on and it would pump the water out. And I put a hose in the bathroom window and you could fill the bath with it. And it was more seeing the potential weight. Because you're driving your car everywhere, you're making all that hot water is there to do that sort of thing. Interests me. So I'm getting sort of caught up in different ways of where we're not using all the power that's available, and that's where this wee seed that's germinated and it's sprouted now, and I'm thinking that I'm absolutely sure that I could power that boat to fish with just an electric motor and batteries. I think the battery tech has now developed to such an extent that you can get enough battery power to work to do a day's fishing. All you need to be able to do, if you've got access to shore power, you only need to be able to do one day's fishing, because you can charge it again at night. So on that basis, really started looking into it, and then a whole can of worms grew round about me with what I was going to do. But the ironic thing is that
the worms feeding on the seeds.
Yeah, they're going the whole hog. Yeah,
a busy head.
it's all nibbling away. But the whole ironic thing is that the actual tech to do it is not the only thing that's actually of recent times. Is the battery technology. It's the only thing that's changed. The motor that I ended up putting in the boat it's out a submarine. It's a 25-year-old design of motor. There's nothing new about that, and solar panels aren't new. It's only really that the batteries became of a size that you could put in the boat and keep and actually power it, that would be enough to do a day's work. The next stumbling block was the MCA, because when I got in touch with them, we found out that there isn't an all-electric boat in the UK on the fishing registry. They didn't have a coding for it. There's a couple of pilot boats in the Thames and maybe somewhere else, but there's no actual sort of fishing boat that's trying to do this. So there was no protocol, there was no coding to follow. So when I first got in touch with them, they were obviously quite, not suspicious, but
Sceptical.
almost dismissive.
Okay.
Oh, somebody's going to do this, but I don't want to use the wrong word because it's a government body. They'll get me into trouble. but yeah, sceptical. Let's say. So they were sort of just reserved. They didn't want to. They knew it was coming. They knew at some point that somebody's going to try and make a all electric boat. And I think they were hoping it wouldn't be just right now. So I sat down and had to host my first ever Zoom meeting I'd never done a Zoom meeting before in my life, and had to host that and present the case to them in Southampton. And it was also the first day that was my first shot of COVID. So I had a wrecked throat and I felt terrible, and I had to present my first Zoom meeting. I didn't feel good at the end of that at all. I didn't feel that I presented the case well. But anyway, they accepted that it was going to happen. So then they gave me a list of stuff I was to do. What's the first thing in the list that I have to do for the MCA? Hazard log. All the things that can go wrong. Yeah. All the things that can go wrong and how to mitigate them. So the first thing I put on my hazard log was stress-induced or anxiety-based nervous breakdown, with not understanding how to meet the compliance. Which I think is actually, I mean, I'll joke. Well, it's not joking aside. To me, that was a reality. That was going to be the.
I don't know if they would have seen that as one of the.
Well, anyway, but in hindsight, I have to say that though they were sceptical to start with and wary, they wanted to make sure that, because it's the first one, they wanted to make sure that everything that coming through was going to be right, because they can't, rightly saying, you can't, if you make this, it can't actually blow up or burst into flames, or you can't go wrong on you, because it'll get attention. So we ended up working together quite well. Initially it was difficult, or I found it difficult initially, but at the end up we worked together quite well to actually get the boat coded.
But they would probably see that you knew what you were talking about and you were serious. And
I think that only developed through time. I think initially it was very much a very kid gloves I was getting treated with, but through time, and I mean, I think now the vote speaks for itself. It's that's now a year and a half. May 23, I got launched, and I immediately went for rehab. I had 2 weeks off as soon as I got launched. I didn't go out on it at all.
When you say the boat was launched, so it wasn't a convert. You didn't convert one of your.
Yeah, So maybe I haven't explained that properly. And I've jumped the gun a bit. Maybe So I took the Lorna Jane, which was my Cygnus 21. That was a 1978.
Okay.
Boat. It's an old boat, but then a Cygnus 21 is the Grey Fergie of the fishing industry. Absolutely. They're across the whole country. They're rock solid, established boats.
Even in Scrabster there, where they're fishing in seas, in real heavy seas. In it. There's a
strong, solid boat that's got a relatively efficient hull. There's a lot of good reasons to use that boat, and it can carry the weight.
And was it called Lorna Jane?
Yeah.
Then, before.
Yeah, I bought the boat from Southern Ireland.
Okay.
From Dunfanaghy. And I had to go through the whole registering process, but then that was 5 years previously when I was fishing it with diesel engine.
Yeah.
So it's an old boat that's an established type of boat that to me was the right boat to use, and luckily it was the boat I had.
And did you feel it lent itself to what was needing?
It almost lent itself. So because there were so many unknowns, we're stepping into really unknown territory, and it was all done by gut feeling. You can do you could do displacement calculations and all of that, but I didn't trust my own gut feeling over how the boat would perform. I didn't actually know. The big concerns were deck and scupper height, because I didn't know what weight I was going to have to put in. I'd taken weight out the boat. The boat was stripped down to nothing, so starting from scratch. I'd weighed what I took out, and I probably took about 700 kilos I took out the boat.
The ballast.
Yeah, and ballast and engine and gearbox and
of course,
all the plumbing, and
of course that would make
exhausts, fuel tanks. Well, but the fuel tanks are variable, because I had a 45-gallon fuel tank in it, which is quite a big tank for a small boat. But that's a variable weight, but it still had to carry the weight, was that 220 kilos or something,
Yeah.
it still had to carry that weight.
Yeah.
So that was all a bit unknown. It was kind of winging that a bit. But again, it's what we were saying earlier. If you don't know how much you do know, you've built up. And so the whole way through, I just went with my gut feeling. I think this should be okay, and this won't be okay. And what I was bothered about was how deep the boat would sit in the water, and then I would lose my scupper height. For the scuppers have to have a minimum of 200mm clearance, and if the boat was heavy and it went below that, the deck wouldn't be right. So I ended up having to raise the deck, which then is going to affect your stability.
Yeah.
Your stability. And I also knew I wanted solar panels, which probably about 140, 150 kilos of solar panels up at full head height on a small boat. So that was the big unknown for me, really, was what difference the solar panels would make to the stability.
Yeah.
But because I'd raised the deck, I could then afford to ballast the boat more.
Yeah.
So ended up with...
I mean, that's what's in my mind, but that's an oversimplification, but I would have thought you would have replaced things like engine and fuel tank, all that weight, you would have replaced it with more ballast.
So the engine weighed 200 odd kilos, roughly. I can't remember the exact numbers now. I think it was around about 200 kilos. The engine weighed, quite light for an engine. The batteries that I've got in weigh 450 kilos, so the batteries are twice the weight of the engine. Then when you take all the fuel tank, the ballast that was in the boat already, it surprised you about all the stern gear and exhaust boxes, never all that, that all adds up. So I've got 600 kilos of ballast in as well, on top of the four. So there's a ton in the boat.
Yeah, and it goes.
and it goes, aye. So the boat's ballasted up, it's going, we've got that working right, it's passed its coding. The other sort of ingredient in the whole pot, which I mentioned, was the funding. So I'm convinced that a project like that was eligible for funding. That had to get fund. They couldn't not support that. That's what I was thinking. So, but the only fund that I could find available was Marine Scotland's Marine Fisheries Fund. That was the only one that I could find that it kind of fitted to. I've never done a funding application in my life. I've always treated them as things that you stay away from, because you only get, with funding, you only get what you put in. If they're going to give you 10 grand of funding, you're going to have to do 10 grand's worth of work to get it. That's the vibe or the feeling I've had of a fund. But I really felt that this was eligible, and the numbers were maybe big enough that it was worth pursuing. So I started looking at that. Then partially way through the funding thing, I mean, there's the amount of detail that they want is huge. They want 3 quotes for absolutely everything. None of my time was eligible. And when you're doing the 3 quote thing, that you know who you want to buy the item off, but you've got to phone up 2 other companies and waste their time and you've got to pretend you're interested, because if they think you're just getting a price, they won't
asking them for a quote that they know they're not going to do the work.
So it's not. I didn't like that at all. That whole side of it, uncomfortable with. But anyway, another thing was that none of my time was eligible at all. I couldn't, because I was applying for the funding application, I couldn't claim any of my time that I'd put in. If I'd gone to the local boatyard and said, can you make me this boat all electric, I applied for a grant, and they quoted me 100,000, I could have applied for the grant, and I would have got the percentage of the 100,000 with all their time included. Whereas when I applied for it, I had to pick out every individual item and get prices for all of that, and I couldn't use any of my time. So I ended up, at the end of the job, I think I put roughly £40,000 worth of my time into converting the boat, and I put roughly £20,000 worth of my time into administering it. So between the MCA and the funding application, I think it took up roughly about 400 hours. It's massive. Through the process as well, though, I was looking at ways of getting a higher funding rate. One of the ones was if you do a study, if you treat the whole project as a study, you could get 100% funding, which, bing, ears pricked up at that. It was all over that. So, and the whole point of that is that if they do a study, then it's far-reaching. You can reach lots of people with it. And I'm thinking, who do you know that's ever read a study? Do you know any? Have you ever read a study? Nobody's ever read a study. If you want to reach people, it's not with a study. And besides that, if I went down that road, it'd be through a university. The university would own the project, and I'd be left doing what the university said. So none of that called me. So at that point, I was trying to think, if the point's to reach people, then the best way to do that is through videos, films. Everyone spends their whole time going out in the boat in the morning, watching YouTube or flicking through videos. So if you want to actually reach people, it's through video or film. So I then went back to them and said, how about if we document the building of this boat on film and make a documentary about the build process? Would that help my funding application? And they came back, whether that's what changed it or not, but they came back up, my percentage got up from 40% to 60% of the costs, which was a big difference. So we ended up getting the boy across the road, Joe, 23 years old he was then, to film the whole process. And that's turned into a documentary I'm really, really proud of. It's turned into a real story that reaches an awful lot of people. Anyone who watches it is, so far, seems to be, blown away with it. They're because it explains the whole story of building the boat and the challenge of breaking through the administrative side.
It is a wonderful story. So you're now successful with your grants, and
the grant thing all worked well, apart from the downside of the funding was that they put a deadline on it. I didn't get approved. The dates were so tight. April 22, they released the funding applications became open for you could apply for in April 22 you could apply for the funding, the grant funding. They actually didn't get their form together in time, and it ended up being, I think it was late July before the form was ready for you to fill in to actually apply. I didn't get approved. I didn't get the bit of paper to say that I was approved for funding till mid-October 22, and the project had to be completed, MCA coded and signed off by the end of March, end of the financial year in 23. So 5 months from when I get given the funding to complete the whole project. Oh, and that's the thing that nearly finished me. Really, I can build the boat. Building the boat's straightforward. There's nothing in the boat building process or conversion process that was technically any kind of real challenge. But to get the MCA to approve all the different pieces of kit and do all that in time for a funding deadline, that
did you have to do a roll test and things like that?
Yeah, I had to do all the roll tests. Yeah. I mean the stability tests at the end of the job. I'd prepped it all and everything was set up. So really the final MCA coding was quite straightforward. Normally when they come to give you your 5-year test, you walk away with a bit of paper with lots of things to do. I'd very, very few, so that worked out fine. Yeah. So you got there past the line with the skin of your teeth. I felt like it. Well, I was, like I said, that to go into rehab after it, I was absolutely frazzled at the end of that. I've never been so. In fact, it's the most. I mean, I ended up in hospital with a heart condition. In the process, I've since had to stop drinking. That's a real tragedy. But I don't know. You've no idea how far down the road to be in an alky are till you've got to stop completely. That's very honest. Well, it's. I mean, until you've got to stop completely, you've got a lot of satisfaction. And with absolutely, it's the most rewarding boat I've ever done, the most nourishing project I've ever had, and fishing it is an absolute joy. I can't tell you the benefit of working on a silent boat. And it's something that I knew it was going to be quiet, but I didn't realise that was a huge thing. I didn't realise it was such a big deal. I'm going to ask you a question which I'm sure you've been asked many, many times in different contexts. I'm sorry, I'm spoken for. From your knowledge and experience of taking the project from where you started to what you have now in completion and working, and I'm not expecting you to do it, but can you see the potential to take that to bigger boats? What would it be? Would it be more solar panels or bigger batteries, or is it feasible to take it to a bigger? I would love to have the energy to do another boat. I don't right now. I'm 61. I'm tired. from the boat building thing. It's quite hard on you physically. I'm getting new knees fairly soon, so there's in the imminent future it's not happening, but it's definitely that could be scaled to probably up to a 10-metre boat, but you're into different battery techs and you're into different voltages and much more regulations. So, and the downside with that is that if you go to the bigger boat, you're going to need 3-phase to charge. I can charge my boat off I could charge it off an ordinary household plug if I wanted, but I've got a 16 amp shore power, blue commando plug is how I charge my boat. Bigger boat, you're going to need 3-phase.
Okay, yeah. And you've all the pleasures of being, as you say, sailing boat and all that. Do you see a marked difference in the running cost?
So the running costs are, I can't say, because I'm fishing the boat in a different pattern to what I was fishing the diesel boat, so I don't really have figures I can lie over the top.
Like a true comparison.
Yeah, that would be accurate. I mean, it's like all stats and figures, they really are mostly nonsense. It's hard to get accurate ones. But what I can say is I've done, so since I launched the boat, I've been planning to, the aim is to work 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Every third day is what that's been my plan. I could work it every day if I wanted to. The running I've done 2,500 miles in the boat and not burnt any diesel. That's 2,500 miles and there's no fuel whatsoever.
Yeah.
Which is that's the brief we've been set into, needed to get to zero carbon. But so getting on to the running costs, so I've got to plug it in to charge it with electric. This summer from March until mid-September, my total fuel bill was been £335
for charging
shore power. Yeah, that's the total fuel running costs, which I reckon to do the same miles in diesel would be well over 1,000. So, but that's not the actual surprise, or not the surprising saving. The unseen saving is I've got no maintenance. The maintenance is so small. I've got no oil filters, no fuel filters, no manky fuel tanks, no impellers, no wear plates, no fan belts, no alternators breaking down, that list goes on and on and on. Yeah. What I'm not doing to the boat, and though that's not a fixed number, what you're not spending it's hard to quantify that number, what you're not spending, but it's massively relevant.
Well, it's very relevant because what you're not spending is cutting your expenses.
Yeah, let's get back to the bottom line. What we're saying, it's going back to the bottom line. The bottom line is the critical number.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, with the amount you've paid.
So the outlay,
shore power.
Yeah, aye.
I mean,
so the shore and the other relevant thing about the shore power is that's at commercial rate. I'm paying that. That's paying 75 pence a kilowatt. So your house, you'll be paying under 30 pence a kilowatt in your house. Yeah. So the reality is if you could find somewhere to charge it you were getting a decent rate for electric, it would be. I mean, surely you would think the wind farm companies or the hydro dams, people are making renewable electricity. They could be backing this project quite easily.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And do you think it has a future?
At the moment, I don't think it does. No, because there's no. I find myself as being, I'm the only person in the country, possibly the world. I don't think there's another actual. I haven't been able to. I'd love to find someone else who'd done a commercial fishing boat somewhere else, but with all the reach, we haven't found anyone else in the world. So so far I'm the only person that's actually wanted to do it. There's no. So finding some. Everyone else, like everyone's interested. All fishermen are definitely interested. It's people that I speak to. Everyone's interested and on board with it. Thinks it's a good idea. But as far as getting someone else to commit, why would you? Why would someone else like you can buy a Cygnus 21 the same as mine for 30-40 grand, a good one. The diesel works perfectly well, it does its job, you can go out and you can fish and do your jobs, so that side of it is there. But why would you step into the unknown? Because that's very much where I am. When you're right out the front, there's no support, and I really think that the funding side or the policy making side of the government should be giving you an after support. It shouldn't be. I mean, it's a irresponsible use of public money is to give me 34 grand that they gave me to put into an unknown project and then leave me to sort it out on my own. There should be, if there was an aftercare that came with it, you'd definitely get more uptake. Because you can, as a fisherman, it's all very well getting given a boat to go and fish, but if that's going to give you problems that you don't know about, you don't want.
But do you not envisage there could be 25 years time? It could be all the services to support. I mean, I absolutely believe that it's a functioning. The boat's capable. It's every bit as capable as its sister ship. That's diesel. It does its job. So there is a future in it. There absolutely is a future in it. But it's going to need support. The boat does its job. You could have. And actually, given the right boat, the other thing that I find interesting is given the right boat with enough space below decks and enough room, you could do a conversion. You can convert it to electric in the space of 2 to 3 weeks. Okay.
Engine out, batteries in, bolt an electric motor on the shaft.
Well, that must be an incentive in itself.
You would think, but again, it's. I mean, without going over environmentalist and over greeny, I find the threat of a uninhabitable planet quite a motivator. I don't. That bothers me that we're looking straight at that, or I believe we're looking straight at that. Not everyone does, but I believe we're looking straight at that, and it's not a motivator to do everything you can. I mean, I don't see anything else worth investing in.
No, but from a business point of view, to cut your expenses
is a massive thing. Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
Totally. Without looking over and
beyond any of that. Beyond. Just purely from a business point of view, it does make sense.
Yeah,
but you've got to trust that the boat's going to work. Because I don't want to big it up to be the holy grail answer to everything, because it won't suit every form of fishing. It'll suit small potting boats that don't do a huge travelling. It might suit longliners. It might suit ringing or seine netting in some form, because you're not using anything like the same power as you are towing a net. It's not going to do trawling of any sort, and it's not going to do people who want to travel long distances without having some kind of daily access to electricity. So it's not everybody's answer, but it's an answer to a fair sector, fair amount of the sector.
Well, what about your hull then? How's that powered? That's
powered off a separate motor and standard hydraulics. It's a really familiar setup. It's just not got a Honda power pack engine or bolted on engine, so it's got an electric motor that powers it. That's the noisiest part of the boat. It's the hauler. You put the hauler on, and just the hydraulic, the oil passing through the hoses.
That's funny, because you're saying that, but it's probably no noisier than any hauler. Everything else is silent. I mean, that's a real thing. You'll hear that when you get on the boat. It does make a noise. And it's also strong. The hauler's strong. I mean, the hauler could, if I've got the bypassing it set, but it would pull the boat over if it wasn't set. Yeah. And have you got the patent?
I don't think. I don't. Even if there was a patent, I don't have the energy to go down another paperwork exercise.
Yeah. Well, I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, Hans, where can people learn and see what you do and online?
So part of what we did was we set up a website for the boat. Once the boat was finished, we made a website for it that contains a whole load of information. There's loads of information on it. There's sort of pictures. There's a whole story of the timeline, and all the costs as well are there. But I've also got 2 information films and a link to the hour-long documentary that has been really popular, sold out. In fact, in Oban we outsold the opening nights of Barbie with the film. So the documentary's there to watch. You can watch that on Amazon Prime or on the website's own streaming page.
And what addresses is that?
That's www.it'llneverwork.boats.
Okay. And on the Amazon Prime and things like that.
Just look up the film's called. Sorry, I haven't mentioned that. The film's called It'll Never Work.
Okay.
Yeah, and you search that on Amazon.
That's on YouTube.
It's on Amazon. It's not on YouTube. There's only sort of wee trailers or clips if you want to watch the full feature. It's on Amazon. But I can stress that if there's 2 options. You can stream it from the website itself, that we get all the proceeds from. If you buy it off Amazon, they get 60%.
Yeah.
So if you can get it, if you want to support the film properly, then, or the project properly, then. And I doubt I'll ever go into profit from this. It's just really about recouping some of the costs of the whole project.
For the project to get the funding, it would be.
You get it straight from the website.
And the website is
www.it'llneverwork.boats.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Hans. It's been a real interesting chat. Well done. I think it's fantastic what you've come up with. Well done.
Well, it's been really interesting talking to you, Jim. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. But I think the next podcast should be about you. You've got a wee bit of a story.
I've not taken an engine out and.
You've still got your own story. It's worth hearing.
Well, I suppose we all did. What they used to say, there's a good book in everybody.
Aye. Well, I'm waiting on it.
Okay.